Welcome, folks. We'll get started in maybe 1 minute. A few other people are joining us. And oh, this is good. We have a good crew. We were a little sad a few minutes ago when we had 3 people in the room. No. Okay. Hey, Chris. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, I think we're going to get going here. My name is Risa Shimoda. I'm the Executive Director of the River Management Society. And thrilled to have you all here. And this is the first in a series of webinars whose topics align with 4 areas of study or areas of experiences that we ask of our River Studies and Leadership Certificate students. And so we have a number of y'all on the, I can tell from your names with us today, but this is open for anyone. And the series will include, this is the first with folks whose work involves GIS. And we'll have one in a couple of weeks where folks rely on their skills in river safety as part of their job. Then we'll have some scientists in a couple of weeks after that. And the final group in early November will be folks who are involved in river policy in some sort. So I'm going to start going now. We are recording this, and the recording will make available as soon as we get it posted in a day or 2. It might take a couple of days. So the folks who are here, I'll have them describe their backgrounds a little bit more, but we'll hear from David Rutter, from a senior environmental planner, and I'll just mention your areas of expertise. You can talk about your organization. Maria Meadis, Chris Elder, and Lucy Netwick, whose experiences are quite different. So I think you'll find it really interesting. And they'll talk about how GIS is involved in their work. We just kind of put this up to show that GIS is a skill, like geometry, I guess, if you will, that is helpful in a lot of different kinds of jobs. And I think you probably already know how broadly it can be applied. Here are some, you don't need to get too into the weeds on all the text, but we asked the folks who are here, the panelists, to just think about themselves and their organizations and how entry-level positions might be good portals for some of the people who are here today, and what they would advise. What are some of the opportunities for learning more about the organizations and leveraging GIS skills, looking for GIS related jobs, and other advice. So folks will the panelists will speak to one or more, or maybe several of these different topics, and it was mostly like a thought starter for them. I'm going to hand it off to our first panelist, and I'm going to have you describe yourself, David, and your involvement, and go for it, and just let me know when you want to change the slides.
Thanks, Risa. Just to let everybody know, I think a big reason I said yes to this is as a means of just saying wherever you're at now, don't worry about it, because you may end up somewhere entirely different. So I am a self-described water geek. Most everything that I have done that I enjoy doing tends to cycle around water between paddling, skiing. But I started as a history teacher. That was my undergrad. Didn't have any GIS skills and had never even heard of GIS at the time. I love maps and map making and that kind of thing, but that was on the technical side of things, and I was a history person. I did end up going into pursuing some other things with teaching, just because history jobs were few and far between if you were just certified in history. eventually ended up back in school getting a master's in adult education with a focus in environmental education. And that opened up some routes that really got me into the water planning world. So after I had gotten my master's, I ended up as a watershed coordinator in Ohio. So working on writing and developing watershed action plans for how to protect and restore streams. Um, and that was my first introduction to GIS within that. And I kind of learned on the job. Um, we had, that was at Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission in Columbus, Ohio. I had a great GIS team there and was able to learn a bit of GIS. So all of my GIS is really kind of self-taught, learning on the job kind of a thing. And so highly encourage you, if you're not already in that, go ahead and take those GIS classes, get the GIS, and that will put you in good stead no matter where you land. And so, and within that, I will say that my history degree, I use regularly the skills that I learned in that in my daily job and where I'm at now. So go ahead and switch that. Okay. So I work for Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana Regional Council of Governments, which is the metropolitan planning organization for the Cincinnati region. You can see here, I'm not going to read through all of that. It's a very large region, 8 counties. Most of my work happens just in our 4 Southwest Ohio counties, just because that's the state that gives us money to do water related programming. And so the majority of my work tends to be in those 4 counties, but I do work on occasions in the rest of that. So it maybe not what you might think if you're thinking of career in rivers, that you would go to a regional planning organization, but look at those local planning places, because that's a lot of times where watershed work is happening, where that planning on the local level, and those GIS skills are super critical. We have an outstanding GIS team here at OKI, and that's, when we talk about how I use GIS in my daily job, I rely on other people for the most part in doing that. But there are some very specific tasks where I use it in my own. So go ahead and advance the next slide, please. And so I will get these links and get them into the chat box after I'm done with my part speaking here on that. But these are some of the areas that I use GIS on a almost daily basis. So this consistency reviews, these are reviewing permits to install for sewer projects and things. And our team here at OKI developed this tool. I can quickly enter the address for the site. It quickly shows me if it's where it's located within a facility planning area, and if I need to do any deeper dive work on that. So that's one that I use almost on a daily basis. Kind of how I got connected with RISA was through work with the Ohio River Way and then the Ohio River Basin Alliance. And this is the Ohio River Way digital guide. And I'd encourage you to explore this. This is we're over 300 miles now of the Ohio River that's designated as a water trail, but also with land-based systems. And so there's a digital guide that you can pull up on your phone. It has real-time commercial traffic locations. So if you're out paddling on the water, you can see that. It's got a bike route with on there that lays out if you wanted to do cycling or drive it by car to connect those river towns. And so that guide requires continual kind of adjustments. And I mentioned the AIS, which is the location services. I looked at it today, and it looks like somewhere between Monday and today, it stopped updating. And so all the points that are on there right now are from Monday. But our GIS person that manages that is at a conference. So it might be a couple days before we get that fixed. And then a last one that I'll talk about is the Water Resources Viewer. And so this is just a regional tool. It's a mapping that's out there where we list, you can turn on these different layers, floodplains, the streams, trying to think what other parts are within that. Anything related to water or groundwater. in one location. You can just kind of click on that, pull it up, and see what the water resources are for the region. And I use that quite often as well within those consistency reviews. So those are just some of the ways that we use GIS within the planning world of things that ties back into that water. And I will say, like, we hire a number of interns every year, and one of the first things that I'm looking for is somebody that's got GIS skills, just because my own GIS skills are somewhat limited. And I think we're on to the next person at this point.
Okay, we'll pass it on. Okay, Marina, you're up.
Great, cool. Well, thank you. I'm happy to be invited to be on this panel. As you can see from my background information here, my first GIS related job was actually working with the River Management Society. And I started that shortly after I completed a year-long GIS certificate program. And so I worked with RMS to help develop the National River Recreation Database. And then I continued to kind of develop my GIS skill set in grad school. But when I started working at USGS after my first year in grad school, my GIS skills weren't super advanced yet. And so it's definitely something that I continued to develop over the years through some of these real world applications with various projects that I've been involved with. So with my USGS work, I use a lot of GIS to help answer questions about where rivers flood and erode and how that relates to water quality, aquatic habitat health, and public safety. So next slide, please. So I'll talk about a few different examples of projects at USGS, kind of that start from the small local scale and go all the way up to the more national scale, and how GIS is incorporated into those projects. And there are a lot of different offices and science centers within USGS that focus on different scales of work. So I work at the Maryland, Delaware District of Columbia Water Science Center, and we're based in Baltimore. And so we really focus on a lot of local scale projects. And so water science centers are also where all of our hydrologic technicians work. And so they're the ones that are going out and collecting a lot of USGS data and managing all of the stream gauges that we probably all know pretty well. And water science center staff can also help with different regional or national scale projects as well, especially some of the more GIS related projects. So here I have just two examples of some of the more local scale projects that have relied on GIS. And so one was based in Maryland, where I had used LiDAR, which is a type of high resolution terrain model to remotely map stream erosion in small headwater streams. And so all of this project was focused in Maryland. This method, since it's a GIS-based method that can also be expanded to other areas. Earlier this year, we were actually working with the National Park Service to discuss implementing this type of method to national park sites to help identify and quantify stream erosion, especially stream erosion near things like culverts and trails and other places that might be a concern for the stream to erode into. And then another project that I wanted to highlight is called StreamStats. And so this is a web application that provides access to spatial analytical tools that are useful for water resources planning and management. And so StreamStats study areas are developed at more of a local or regional scale. And so in this case, our Water Science Center worked with Washington, D.C. to incorporate the storm drain and storm sewer network into this kind of larger stream network to be used with StreamStats to, kind of better develop these flood frequency regression equations that are used for a lot of planning and water quality related issues. And so you can kind of see just from this image, kind of centrally within this image is the main interior building. And so this map shows all the different storm drains, and you can actually go to this website and click on a storm drain, and it will delineate the whole sewer shed. So everything that kind of drains to these different points, you can like visualize that and get a lot of really cool information from that. And then another thing I wanted to highlight, just a lot of work that happens more locally at water science centers and also nationally too, but the use of drones has also really expanded. And, it's expanded the type of data that we can collect. And so a lot of the post-processing analyses and interpretation of data that's collected with drones also really relies on GIS skills. And also, so projects at the local scale usually allow for more opportunities to do both GIS work and also get out in the field to, collect data. A lot of my work now is a lot of computer-based, but, I still do get to get out in the field occasionally. And it's always a good day when we can get out and actually be in the river. So next slide, please. So at the Maryland, Delaware, DC Water Science Center, we also work with a lot of other staff within the Chesapeake Bay region, since that's where I'm located. And so we help answer a lot of kind of regional scale science questions related to management of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And so on the right, I just have an example of a map that shows the prediction of improving or worsening stream bank vegetative protection from 1985 to 2022. And so to develop this type of model, we need a large amount of landscape variables that are compiled using GIS. And then we also use GIS to help view and interpret the model outputs and look at spatial patterns. And so you can kind of see, like, in the red is areas where you have kind of worsening conditions. And this is really focused around like the DC, Baltimore, Richmond urban corridor, but then a little bit to the west, we see areas that have some improving conditions. And so this, just knowing the spatial relationship can tell us a lot of information. And so at USGS, we also work on a lot of science communication products, and many of these are GIS based. And so this image on the left is showing just a screenshot of a mapper that was put together. And so we make a lot of these different web applications and mappers, and we call them geonarratives, but it's usually story maps is what a lot of people kind of refer to them as, but just this different, science communication tool that incorporates a lot of map and interactive mapper information. So next slide, please. And then I also just wanted to highlight one national scale project that, many folks within the river management community might be familiar with, which is the USGS hydrography layer. And so right now there's a big effort to update the hydrography data set using more detailed elevation data from LIDAR. And so we're able to detect much smaller streams and also delineate flow lines that much more accurately fit the actual shape of rivers and streams. Because I know in the past that was, these flow lines were drawn from these old topo maps. And so a lot of times the streamlines were really kind of straightened and they didn't quite follow the actual meanders of the river, and a lot of smaller streams were excluded. And so there's a big effort right now through specifically this USGS 3D elevation program to use a lot of higher resolution elevation data to update these hydrography maps. And so, this is just another example of where we're using GIS on this large national scale to update these really important hydrography maps. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to kind of end my time with some concluding thoughts on some emerging tools and technologies within GIS-based research at USGS. And so one of the biggest kind of emerging areas for us is using high performance computing, especially as our geospatial data are being generated on a finer and finer scale. And there's a need to run these models on larger and larger areas. And so we have a couple of these supercomputers at USGS that, more and more people are starting to use. I don't think anyone really had experience with them when these started becoming available. And so it's something that we've all kind of been learning on the job. And just like that, another area that's really been emerging within USGS research is the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning and deep learning. And so one example that I have here is this USGS platform called Flow Photo Explorer that uses time-lapse imagery from trail cameras to actually rank photos based on how much water is in each photo, and then it estimates stream flow from these images from trail cameras. And then there's also, I just wanted to kind of highlight that, more and more people are kind of moving to these code-based workflows so that we have these reproducible workflows and we're able to kind of work on a larger scale. And so the two main coding languages that we use are R and Python. Some people use both, some people use one versus the other. And kind of with all of this said, there's not an expectation that anyone, should really know or be an expert in these types of things when they come in an entry level position. You know, I think just having like a GIS background and maybe some basic coding experience is really puts you in a good position. You know, USGS scientists are really passionate about what they do. And so there's always someone to reach out to for help, especially as an early career scientist. And, you know, at USGS, we work on a lot of like, you know, new problems. We work with this emerging technology. And so a lot of times, you know, even more senior scientists don't know how to do something. And so we're all kind of constantly learning together. And so it is like, you know, as long as you have sort of these basic GIS skills and a willingness to learn, there's a lot of different opportunities to really grow your skills and find kind of your niche and where you would like to kind of evolve your career within USGS and river science. Next slide, please. And I'm almost done. I don't know if I'm almost
You're
out
good.
of time, but
You're good.
okay, cool. Yeah, so I just wanted to end this slide with this link to some more general information about USGS. Even for me, sometimes organizational structure can be a little confusing because there are science centers like where I work at. There are also mission areas that people work directly with, and they do a lot of national scale work. And then there's other programs within each mission area. And so this link kind of takes you to this page that has more information about the organization of USGS. And then there's this link that kind of highlights careers and employment opportunities. And I know, you know, right now there's a lot of limitations with federal hiring, but there's still a lot of helpful information in there to kind of think about. And yeah, and then I just also wanted to include this nice satellite image of a sediment plume at the mouth of this river in Canada. So I had a bunch of links in my slides, so I'll put those in the chat for people to look over. And, you know, at the end, if there's time for questions, or my email is also on here. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if people have them.
Thank you, Marina. Before we go to the next panelist, also, if just for fun, I think that we have 35 people or well over 30 participants here. If you could put in the chat and your name, well, we'll know your name from your address, yourself, but where you are, if you're in school, what school you're going to, just for folks to get an idea of the wide variety of folks who are attending, because it's pretty cool. People here from all over. Okay, next up, Chris, look at your fancy slide.
Could I grab the screen, Risa?
Yes, I think you can just do so by requesting. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I got it.
Oh, I need to stop. Oh, yeah, I think you can just go.
Overpowered you.
Yeah, no worries. That's great.
Well, hey everyone. My name's Chris Elder. I'm up here in Northwest Washington, outside of Birmingham. It's good to see a couple folks on the call. I see Katrina and Sage. Both are two students, or one recent graduate who both went through the River Studies and Leadership program, and both of them have done a little contract work for me with Rivershed SPC. So I wear a couple hats. I am the Northwest Chapter Officer for the River Management Society and trying to support some of our efforts up here in the Northwest. I have worked for local government for the past 11 plus years. I was doing kind of farmland preservation as well as watershed and climate planning for Whatcom County, which is the northwesternmost county in Washington State, for that period of time. And I just started a new job working for King County, running their farmland preservation program. But I have high conservation objectives, and I wasn't quite fulfilling that with my county role, so I created my own for-profit enterprise to try to tackle some of that. So created Rivershed, SPC. SPC stands for Social Purpose Corporation, operates like a limited liability corporation, but allows us to kind of identify other other priorities beyond dollar bills. So also looking to address community, cultural, environmental objectives. As you can guess from the name, Rivershed implies I've got a pretty strong commitment to rivers. Certainly was a raft guide up here on the Nooksack about 14 years ago, bought a raft, and have been running rivers ever since. But Rivershed itself is a small consulting firm that tries to tackle a variety of different kind of environmental planning gaps or opportunities. And as you can imagine, both for local governments or communities in general, the data that goes into communication, decision making is kind of critical. And I'll give you my GIS backstory is I've taken 2 GIS classes and I dropped out of both of them. So I have no certification, no professional or scholastic approvals of my GIS capabilities. And I'll say that I am not a GIS expert, but I understand what GIS can do, and I rely on GIS professionals to make me look better when I'm presenting my work products. So I think in that there's like 2 general pathways of GIS that I see. There's the dabbler, kind of what David described, where we're functionally able to navigate through a map. We recognize the value, we see where it can take us. And that degree of literacy, I think every environmental planner, community planner should have in their belt. And then there's kind of the deep dive, the folks that can actually get in there. It sounds like more Marina's world of, knowing how to get in, manipulate, analyze, develop the data. And those are the folks that I rely on heavily. My primary business partner for Rivershed is a woman named Kate Linzer. She is who I refer to as my GIS wizard, and she has created a lot of what you'll see here momentarily. So I'm just going to go through a few work products we've developed. I actually have an old family farm out in eastern and western Kansas. As you can imagine, a lot of rural conservative members of my family that I have to kind of convince how to develop a relationship with the ecosystem and try to show them what sort of data is available to them. So in this, provide some of the narrative backstory. Want to kind of get them familiar with soils, so create a little bit of a soil map where they can pick in here and see what these different sites are suitable for. Systems exist within those areas, have them be able to look at the imagery as well as the elevation, and then from my own field tours can actually go out and show them, based on this time, this is an example of what's on site. So part of what we've tried to do, or I've tried to do with this in my family, is just demonstrate what data is available to us when we make decisions on how to graze cattle on the land, or what sort of long-term conservation objectives exist. And I'll put all these links in the chat once I get through here, but wanted to just give a little snapshot of what we do. Part of that social purpose corporation concept is that we volunteer our services to one nonprofit every year and donate roughly $3,000 to $5,000 worth of our time to help develop a project. So last year, worked with the Cascades Wolverine Project. They had been making these observations of, let's see if I can actually zoom in here, of wolverines in the North Cascades for the past bunch of years, but I've never been able to actually represent that visually. So we took all of these community observations and mapped it. You can see this is kind of massed in this hexagon shape, so we don't want to be able to show the public where exact wolverine locations have been, such that we don't have wildlife tourists go and show up and try to start hazing or harassing the wildlife. But you can see, generally this is let's see if this will work for me, and it'll give kind of a summary. There's been 38 wolverine observations in this area over the past bunch of years, I think. And I haven't popped this open in a minute, but you can basically get a little bit more detail and see the observations that exist. And I'll let you play around with that at a later date. The project that Katrina and Sage helped us create, and I believe Sage created a lot of this story map you'll see here, but we did some post-wildfire resilience planning for Western Washington, met with a bunch of folks in these 3 counties, Skagit, Pierce, and Snohomish, provided the backdrop of what we were trying to accomplish. But then you've got this actual kind of map where we had maps out on the table, actual paper maps where we were honing in on it, but we're able to kind of give a little bit more specific geographic assessment to folks, so they'll be able to go back here and understand, what is the priority concern in this area. So it's a great communication tool, helps to kind of visually connect folks to what the solution is, what the risk is, and where to go from here. But some great work on this front. One of the first projects I did with Rivershed was down on the White Salmon River, where there was roughly 200 acres of property that was owned by an electric company, needed to transition into conservation ownership. So we went through old surveys, digitized all the survey maps, and tried to help create this interface where members of the community could see what various land uses are. You got these various data sets on here, but again, making the data available in a pretty user-friendly interface is kind of critical for having that engagement and being able to have hard conversations on what future outcomes or desired outcomes should be. Just a couple more quick examples. So my role with Whatcom County was trying to do watershed planning, but needed to somehow demonstrate what watershed or ecosystem data existed. So Whatcom County did not have any sort of environmental viewer before I came on board. And again, it's been kind of hilarious. If you've ever worked with local government or any government, it's a little bit of a crapshoot of what their level of technology might be. And a lot of times it depends on the folks on the inside. I was farming before I came to the government, and somehow I became one of the most significant GIS proponents inside the organization. This is where we tried to kind of collect a landing page for local data, regional data, up to statewide and national data. So again, one of the key efforts I've learned, especially in elected official engagement, is they're always going to ask the hard questions on, what's the data, what's our confidence in the data. So, whether or not people have ever, gone through and clicked every one of these links is up in the air, but we at least made it available, and it allowed me to kind of demonstrate a high degree of confidence in the data I was sharing for decision making. This is getting into that actual watershed viewer. So this is the map. You click view larger map there, brings you here. We're able to kind of front load all of this various, water layers, get into more kind of ecosystem, wildlife habitat, all kind of the backdrop, different associations and districts, as well as some of the priorities, and then all this kind of base data. But again, wanted to create some tool where a property owner can come in, look at their specific geography. Actually, this is my house right there. But I can come in and see, like, where is my property related to the floodplain, related to the stream layers, and start to assess what's my risk, what's my opportunity, how do my own individual property decisions relate to the larger county priorities. And that brings me to where I'm at now, which is my new geography, King County. Everything in green shows you where we have farmland preservation easements. Everything outlined in red is the urban growth area boundaries of Seattle and the other small communities. So now my challenge is to look within these areas that are kind of adjacent or at risk of development, and how do I kind of prioritize. And currently I'm learning all the intersections with salmon recovery and floodplain planning and other kind of ecosystem priorities, and how do we balance working lands with watersheds and water functions. So that's my big rundown. I mean, if you got any takeaway, geospatial data, geospatial presentation management is kind of paramount to community engagement, conversation, decision making, and I can't endorse it enough. But I'm certainly available to chat more with folks if you want to look at the both local government and or consulting end of things. Thanks.
Wow. Well, thanks, Chris. That was like speed dating on GIS maps. That was an awful lot. Well, we'll continue on. Then if we're going to have time for questions, and also Marina, thanks for putting all those links in the chat. Okay, we're going to go back to me sharing, and our final panelist is Lucy. You're on, Lucy.
Hi, everyone. Unlucky for you all, the person with the shortest career gets to go last and talk the longest. So about me, I am currently a fellow with National Park Service. I started in January of last year with the Wild and Scenic Rivers program doing their GIS update for the nationwide rivers inventory. I got to stick around and be essentially a GIS fellow for another program, Panelists Parks program, and then I've returned back to Wild Scenic Rivers earlier this summer, and I get to also work with National Trails. So I graduated from my undergrad in 2023, and I studied environmental geology and geography. And something I like to tell people is that when I took GIS in school, I hated it so bad. The labs were 9 hours long, 500 pages. It was so terrible. And then when I started using real data and making real maps and not Esri's fake training data, I found that I really loved it. So it gets better if you don't like taking a GIS class. Um, and some of my biggest areas of interest in GIS world are data analysis and visualization, which I've gotten to do a lot of work on. And this is an unpopular opinion, but QA/QC procedures, just standardizing big data sets, cleaning them up and making them all nice and pretty. Next slide. So the Nationwide Rivers Inventory was my big GIS project that I got to work on last year. That's how I got involved with RMS. So for those of you that don't know, the Wild Scenic Rivers system is super special rivers, and the NRI are all potentially eligible segments for inclusion into the system. So it's an interagency system with Park Service, Fish and Wildlife, Forest Service, and BLM. And so I got to take a bunch of river data from those 4 agencies and put them into this updated geodatabase. The last time it was updated was almost 10 years before I was born. So it was a very big project. These are kind of my everyday views, just waiting for data to come in from the 4 agencies, making them all match each other. Some of them didn't even have river names, so getting to do all the QA/QC, and you can see on the right, there's just maybe a quarter of the list of QA/QC procedures that we got to do. I was very lucky that I had a GIS specialist supervisor, that she was my GIS wizard, that I got to work with her a lot on. And then while all this data was coming in, we got to develop a bunch of different versions of a 508 compliant data viewer for the NRI. And so I got to make a bunch of different versions of that, talk to river managers, talk to other MPS employees, other agencies, nonprofits, and see, what do you want out of this data viewer? What are you going to use this data for? How can we build this so that you will actually use it and it will work for you? How will the public use it? How can we build something that will help people find all these very special recreation opportunities close to them? So that was really valuable. And you can look at that at mps.gov/NRI. We also got to kind of develop the website out a little more and just give people a lot more information. This was a year-long project, was super big, super time-consuming, but very, very rewarding. And I still look at it every single day just because I love it so much. Next slide, please. And this is what the data viewer looks like. So all these thick purple lines are the designated wild scenic rivers, and then these smaller blue lines are the rivers on the NRI. So we ended up adding almost 12,500 river miles in the 2024 update, and that was about 1,200 new segments that did not exist before. And so it is really nice seeing a spreadsheet essentially eventually come together, and you get to see the data that you look at every day in context, and you get to remember, oh, these are rivers that people paddle on, and these are rivers in my backyard, and these are rivers that people go with their children or whatever. So it's really valuable to see them in real life. Remember that you are doing this for a very good reason. Next slide, please. So earlier this year, after my fellowship with Wild Scenic Rivers, I got to jump over to another program, the Federalized Parks program in the Park Service, and I got to do essentially the same thing for their geodatabase. So Federalized Parks is a program that takes surplus federal property, so a lot of like decommissioned military bases and things like that, and transfer them to states and cities and counties to turn into parks and recreation. So this program has been around since 1949, and they have never had one master comprehensive public data set. And so in my time with Wild Scenic Rivers, I got really close with the program manager for FLP, and this was something that she said that she was really fighting to have, and so that's how I got to end up working on this. So I got to take a bunch of property data from about 1,600 properties across the country and in 3 Pacific territories, and put them all together, kind of do a lot of the same QA/QC procedures. Some of the data was incomplete, where I would just have coordinates or a park name or an address, and I would have to quote unquote ground truth them online, make sure the park name is the same, make sure there's contact information, update the coordinates if they're wrong, update the acres if the park got a little extra another time. And so this was really special because I got to not only do the GIS part, but I also got to take the lead in writing a lot of the metadata and a lot of the data stewardship procedures, so the SOPs, and I got to really be the lead on a GIS project as opposed to a GIS fellow where I had this person that was really doing a lot of the work and I was helping her, and this was like my project that I got to really take ownership of, which I learned a lot from. And similar to the NRI, I got to make a data viewer and update a lot of, well, their entire website. Next slide, please. And this is what it looks like, nps.gov/FLP. We added 241 new FLP properties, which totaled, or which made the total number of FLP parks over 190,000 acres since 1949. And again, this has never existed online ever. So this was a really big milestone for the program, for the Park Service, for the director, and for me also. Next slide, please. So while I loved every second of all my fellowships, and I'm so grateful that I get to stick around and keep doing it, I definitely face a lot of challenges. Like I mentioned, I graduated in 2023, and starting in 2024, last year, that was my first big girl job out of college. So it was definitely, there were a lot of learning experiences that I had, and it can be really intimidating coming in and you have people that you work with that have worked in this place longer than you've been alive, and so you don't want to be too loud or step on anyone's toes and tell people this doesn't really look right. I faced a lot of, oh well, this is what my data looks like, this is how it works for me, this is how I keep it. I don't think my supervisor's on, so I'll say I go to a lot of meetings where maybe not the most happens. And so I'm like, well, what are we actually doing? What am I doing today? Or where are we going with this? You don't want to reach out to people. You feel like they have more important things going on. You're like, oh, I'm still new. I don't want to ask for too much. So I did definitely face a lot of challenges coming in, and I'm still facing some of them today. Next slide, please. But there are a lot of ways to overcome them. Like I mentioned, I had my GIS expert with the NRI, and I still talk to her almost every day. There is someone who knows a lot more than you, and that's great. and I utilize her every day. There are people who I'll be like, this is what I need to do with my data. This is how I will plan to do it. Is this a waste of time? Is there a faster way to do this? Is there an easier way to do this? And most of the time the answer is yes. So I learned more from my GIS specialist in 6 months last year than I did in my entire GIS class. Like there are people that know more than you and they will want to help you. One thing I've learned is to write everything down, keep track of everything that you do. So when people ask you, how did you get here? You'll know, write down the things that people decide, what your action items are, what the next steps are, what you're going to do tomorrow, when you need things done by. Um, that has helped keep me on track a lot and will kind of prevent me from being like, what do I do today? I don't know, because I wrote it down and I know what I need to do and I know when. Another thing is building and maintaining strong relationships with your colleagues. I don't love to network, but I found that when you build personal relationships with the people that you work with to a certain degree, it makes it a lot easier to ask them professional questions, or it makes me personally feel a lot more comfortable going to them about work things and things that I need help with when you have that foundation of a relationship with them. And it makes it easier to ask for clarity, even if you feel like, oh, I should know this already. I don't want to ask. You should do that. And some good just general skills to have that I found being an early career in NPS is good attention to detail, especially when working on really big data sets. It can kind of feel like things are all over the place and you're jumping from one thing to another. Is just kind of slowing down and being like, okay, let me take time to focus and make sure I'm doing all of these things in the right way so I don't have to go back and do it again. Having clear communication, and so that include in a respectful way, but expressing what you need help with, giving other people deadlines, even if it is scary to do that, and being like, I need this from you by next Thursday, and making sure that your time and energy is also being respected, because it can feel like, oh, well, I don't want to tell this person who's worked here for 40 years that I need something from them, but you deserve to have that also. And then just being organized, version control, records management. Do give all of your GIS projects a name. Do not leave them as my project one, my project two. You need to name them. I have fallen for that trap more than once. And just having some self-motivation and being like, this is what I will do. I don't need to wait for people to tell me what to do. I will get on this. I think that's all I have. Thanks, Risa.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. We have a couple more slides, and I'm going to just unshare and then open it up for questions because we do have a good bit of time. So thank you, you guys. This has been pretty awesome. I wanted to mention that we do have a survey that I'm going to put in the chat in a second. Oops, sorry. And then we have 3 more river career sessions coming up, like I mentioned at the very beginning. And if you signed up for the series, you'll see all of them. The second one is on the 8th, and then I think, yeah, the 8th, and then the 22nd, and then the 5th of November. So here, and then, oh, here we go. This is what's coming up. Then we have a roundtable which is also free, and folks are going to talk about 1 year after Hurricane Helene, good, bad, and ugly, what's happened there. We have a chapter float on the Cahaba River in Alabama with the Southeast chapter. And then we have a week-long river restoration workshop with Dr. John Field, fluvial geomorphology workshop. So we have lots of good stuff coming up, and I'm going to unshare, and I'm going to put a survey link in the chat, if you could it will take 2 minutes or less to fill out. If you could do that, that'd be awesome. And then also, if you have, there's enough of us, maybe if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'm gonna, let's see.
Well, while they're doing that, I want to just highlight something that Lucy said in talking about having somebody there that knows more than you. And I would say that that's one thing I would encourage you to do, those of you that especially are still in school, on finding an internship in an organization that has some strong GIS chops, because that's one thing here in our office. Our interns have access to going to our GIS folks, and they always leave here much better GIS technicians than what when they came in, and that you don't have to be an expert. Like when I said I was looking for people, I just want people that can get into it and manipulate maps. We will make you a better GIS technician.
I'll also suggest in terms of internships, you might not have a million options, not that, that's kind of a luxury. But if you can either go to an organization like David's where you see whatever you're working on, you'll see lots of other types of work that's going on just by talking to him or just by seeing the context for your project. That's really great because you just see things that might catch your attention. Or you can also work for a small company like with Chris's. He's a sole proprietor, but his projects are so varied. If he just spent 10 minutes and told you about the variety of his projects, it would, again, give you just a little bit of more of a spectrum than if you're just, you get a project and you're down in the trenches, you don't see daylight, and then suddenly you're done with the project and you have to move on. So if it's possible to be a little bit strategic besides the actual work that you do, for the context to allow you to see some other options while you're doing your work, be helpful. Anybody have any questions for any of these folks? No, I don't. I think I don't see any questions. Well, if any last words from our panelists?
I think I'll maybe jump in on a little bit of what I heard Lucy talking about, which, a piece that I've noticed gets missed in a lot of GIS stewardship is that kind of metadata piece. And I guess going back to kind of communication to electeds or the communities, there's this challenge with people leaving roles or people jumping into a new project and trying to understand what has happened, kind of maintenance and stewardship of that metadata, who collected it, where did it come from, what's good about the data, what's not good about the data. Like being able to document that as you collect and kind of organize the data is kind of critical. So I think maybe just flagging for all of you early career folks, how the attention you give to the data kind of persists beyond just your act of kind of organizing it and compiling it. So I think those best practices are going to really set you apart. So when you're in a job interview or, entering your first career in this field, if you have those metadata stewardship practices on lock and kind of know what your, bare minimum data parameters are, you can communicate that to your team to say, like, it's important that we collect this metadata as well and steward it. So I think Lucy's point about organization and being kind of strict and strategic in how you do that is highly valuable. I definitely looked at a lot of crappy data that I'm like, oh, what do I do with this? I can't do anything with it because I don't know where it came from. I don't know how to update it. So yeah, spend the extra time. I know a lot of times you're crunching so much data that you get overloaded and you're like, oh, I'll tackle that tomorrow or next week, and it never happens. But try to be strategic in how you collect it and develop some of those best practices right out of the gate. Just one thing that popped up.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Chris. Okay, if we don't have questions, Marina has to describe her background.
This is the Deschutes River, and I made it with LiDAR. And so basically, yeah, it's just like showing the river meanders. And so it's like the different elevation is like the color gradient. So I thought it was a good background for a GIS rivers panel.
Yeah, no, awesome. It's beautiful too. Cool. Well,
And I will say also sort of what I was thinking about when Lucy was talking, you know, definitely don't be afraid to ask people around you, whether it's, you know, your colleagues, if you're in an internship, or, you know, early career person in your job, or it's professors. Don't be afraid to ask them questions, because, you know, I think that what I've sort of learned, and also just sort of kind of as I've become more of like a go-to person, like people really love what they do and they love talking about what they do. And so, you know, if you ask them a question about like, how do I do this? Or can you tell me more about that? Usually, I think in my experience, people have been more than happy to help out and answer questions and point you in the right direction. And so, you know, I always keep that in mind. People love to talk about what they do. So, yeah.
great. Thanks, Marina. Since we have 4 minutes left, I see Will on here. Hey, Will, you want to talk about your trip next month? This is not GIS topic, but since you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm Will Rayner. I'm the Recreation Stewardship Manager here with the Cahaba River Coalition. We're going to spend 3 days on the Cahaba, hearing from local researchers, long-term professionals. We'll stay under the Milky Way on Barton's Beach, Nature Conservancy owned property. We'll paddle about 25 miles over the 3 days. We have canoes, life jackets, paddles, everything you'll need for that. Meals provided, all of that good stuff. So you can find all the information you need on the website. You can find my information on there as well. I'll put it in the chat too. And if you got any questions, feel free to reach out.
Great. Thanks for organizing it and sharing that.
I'm very excited.
Yeah. Okay, going. Wait, oh, check out Will's info. If there are no other questions, I want to thank everyone for attending and for being attentive and not going to sleep, and our panelists for being so interesting, and Lucy for following up, I think, with really a lot of important nuts and bolts points that you can tell were important because everybody else commented on, but they were great to add. So thanks again. And if you have any questions about River Management Society, look us up. Risa Shimoda, Executive Director. If you're not a member, please consider joining. If you are a River Studies and Leadership Certificate student, thank you and good luck on the fulfillment of all your requirements. And for you guys, you know, joining is free, so you don't have to pay. That's a nice benefit. And enjoy the 2 extra minutes you have in this hour. Thanks for being here, and have a good rest of your week, you guys.
Bye, everyone.